Hey, it's Matt Roush,
And Mike Brennan.
and we're back with another segment of the M Squared TechCast.
And yeah, I'm calling in. I'm not sure where Dan lives, but Dan is a member of the Michigan Public Service Commission, appointed last year by Governor Whitmer to that post. And one of the press releases that came across the transom last week was how the Public Service Commission, I don't want to use acronyms, is working to not only make sure that our public utilities, gas and telephones and all the rest, are working properly, but also you've got some assistance available for folks that are struggling financially because of COVID, right, Dan?
That's correct. Yes, and I'm actually here in Northport, Michigan, the tip of the Leelanau Peninsula, where Matt Roush is still very much a legend.
He's a legend in his own mind as well.
I would say infamous at this point. Yeah,
Notorious, perhaps. So anyway, I want to talk a little about that. Obviously, well, particularly now, we don't know exactly what Congress is going to do for the rest of us, but there's some 30 million people nationwide on unemployment, and I'm not sure what the number is in Michigan, but it's a large number. So a lot of people are really struggling financially. So what exactly are you guys going to do for them?
Well, I think the most important thing is that assistance is available, that it has been available, that we've seen some increases in the federal funds and some unique abilities to use those to help the Michigan families that are struggling. So you can find, if you're one of those people, you can call your utility or telecommunications provider. A lot of them have programs. They differ somewhat utility to utility, but for folks who are falling behind or in danger of falling behind, particularly if you're low income or a senior, small businesses, other customers, there's a range of offerings. You can also call 211 or go to MI211.org, my211.org for help, and this will connect you to assistance programs offered by nonprofit organizations across the state, many of whom are partners under the Michigan Energy Assistance Program. So there's a range of assistance that's out there. Best place to start is either with 211 or to call your utility directly and see what they offer.
Okay, so how does the approach taken by Michigan to protect customers differ from that taken in other states? Are there any initial lessons learned or data points on the results?
Yeah, a lot of states, and for good reason, rush to put moratoriums in place, moratoria, I guess, and ensure that customers wouldn't be disconnected. We did that about 10 years ago as part of the Great Recession, and what we learned was that once the economy started turning around again, those folks had huge unpaid bills, really were in a position where it was impossible to come back. And yet everybody else moved on. And so you found a whole group of people that were struggling. And then by the time things started turning around, nobody really paid attention to them. And I think that's what you're seeing in some other states, that you're seeing unpaid balances and late balances really growing and growing to dangerous levels. I think using the lessons that we learned from 10 years ago, we didn't actually put a moratorium in place. Instead, we worked with the utility providers and the telecommunications providers on voluntary commitments not to disconnect folks, particularly low income and seniors, and then worked to make sure that the assistance was there, that we were addressing people where they were and trying to identify the places where COVID was impacting people's ability to pay, communicating the assistance offerings that were in place, and really sort of taking a much more granular, individualistic approach to helping folks who were struggling and falling behind. And I'll say, it's early. I have no idea what's going to happen with this pandemic, but to date, we're actually seeing the folks who are 30, 60, 90 days past due actually holding relatively steady. And I think, nobody's declaring victory yet, but so far, I think we've helped a lot of folks weather the storm by sort of sending signals that they still got to pay for what they use, but that there's assistance available if they're struggling.
Yeah, any idea what the number is on that? How many folks that you are currently helping? Get your arms around that at all?
Yeah, so one program, we used some of the Federal CARES Act funding and then partnered with the utilities, and then the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and used $17.8 million, I think, of that bucket of federal funding to literally pay people's bills directly who were struggling. And that was matched by the utilities contributing or forgiving 25% of the balance. So 3/4 of it came from federal dollars. One quarter was forgiveness by the utilities themselves. And so far, we've helped 40,000 Michigan families under that program sort of avoid falling behind on their utility bills.
Yeah, that's
So,
like,
so
I'm sorry, man. The people that can least afford it right now, that's like you say, the seniors are people that are already, desperately poor or not working, minimum wage type jobs. That's a hole that's really hard to dig out of when you get suddenly you've got to come up with $500 or they're going to cut off your lights or something. For some people, that's just they can't handle that. But it's really good that you guys are doing this.
Yeah, and I will, give a lot of credit to the utilities on this. I think they also saw what happened when balances got out of control and how hard it was, both for their customers, but also for them to dig out of those holes. And they've been creative in identifying customers who usually pay on time, and all of a sudden, we don't know that it's COVID related, but we know that they've missed a payment for the first time in their history. And how do you reach out to those folks and offer assistance? For the people, as you talked about, Mike, who've got those high balances where it may be impossible to get back on their feet, how do you pay them down to a point where then they're eligible for assistance programs? And so there's, I think, a range of efforts. A lot of them are pretty individually tailored to individual circumstances, but to try and meet people where they are and then line them up with the assistance that's available.
So how do these efforts that you're doing tie in with existing utility efforts? I know when I was at WWJ News Radio, I worked quite a few telethons for DTE's Heat and Warmth Fund, which basically keeps people connected through the winter. And some of the stories I'd hear of people really, people. I can't imagine living through a Michigan winter without heat, but there were people doing it. So how do your efforts tie in with those?
Yeah, so some of the additional funds, in addition to sort of the Energy Direct payment programs, are actually now being run through some of those same grantees. The folks who are active in communities across the state, whether it's the Superior Watershed Center up in the UP or Heat and Warmth Fund in Metro Detroit, to give them extra dollars available for the increased customer loads that they're seeing. I think the other piece that we're trying to do sort of along those lines is just to get the word out. I mean, in some ways, Tremaine Phillips, one of my fellow commissioners, was actually on a radio program recently, and sort of the same sort of thing, whether it's a telethon or just trying to find ways through social media and the like to try and get word out that if you're struggling, we have additional dollars available. You can go through the state, or you can go through that trusted nonprofit that you've worked with in the past, and trying to make sure that they've got the resources available and that people know where to go.
So that covers us on gas and electricity and things. What about in the telephone space? What are you doing there? Because people clearly need their phones, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's sort of a two-pronged approach. The first is most of the providers in Michigan signed on to the Federal Communications Commission Chair Pie. They're issued a challenge, the Keep America Connected challenge, to not disconnect folks through the first several months of this. I think I'm either all or almost all of the providers that serve Michigan signed on to that, and I think a lot of people stayed connected. And then there's an awful lot of work being done on sort of broadband and broadband availability. So trying to accelerate some of the grants we've done in partnership with Connect Michigan, a mapping program for Wi-Fi hotspots across the state. For those students or workers who may not have broadband at home, either because they can't afford it or because it's not available in some parts, but to give them a map of locations in their communities where they can go, and whether it's the library or a school or whatever, where there's broadband availability, so that they can go and stay connected through this. There's a fair amount of attention. We don't regulate communications in the same way that we do energy, but we're trying to figure out same thing, how to keep people connected.
Yeah, because I know internet availability, high-speed internet availability, is a big issue where you are in Leelanau County. I still subscribe to the Enterprise, so I read about it occasionally. And it's an even bigger issue in some urban areas and the UP, where there are big swaths where there just isn't any, and there are some wireless providers, trying to make a go of it. But it could be a real struggle to work from home or to study from home in that kind of environment.
Not to interrupt, but even Detroit has 40% people are not connected to broadband. I think probably the number is higher than that, but that's the number I've seen. So it is a critical problem. So.
Yeah, and as whether it's the all of our kids now essentially working from home, and who knows what happens in the fall. But that access is critical, and you're absolutely right. People think of it as a rural issue, and it is, but it's also an urban issue, and there's an awful lot of places, both rural and urban, across our state that don't have it. If anything, I hope there's got to be some changes that come out of this, and an increased focus on broadband availability across the state, in whatever community folks live in, has to be pretty close to top of that list.
Yeah, I think a lot of the schools, whether the administration likes it or not, are going to be forced to go to virtual. When I'm in Ann Arbor, I'm not in Ann Arbor today. They've decided to go all virtual because that's a different community. It's a very high educational, high income community, so it's not typical of the rest of the state. But I think when you start to hear all these plans being rolled out by school districts around the state, they're all going to depend on broadband to some degree. Some of them are going to allow kids to go in every other day or for a few hours each day. But in the end, the bulk of it's still going to be broadband, right?
Yeah, I don't know, and I think there are active conversations probably happening in every district. But I don't think there's a world in which broadband is less important than it was 6 months ago.
Yeah. We have about 3 minutes left now. I just wanted to ask, what changes has the commission taken internally in response to the pandemic? Is everybody working from home at the MPSC now, or how's that working?
We are. And some of our folks, this is business as usual. Our gas safety technicians have worked from home so that they can be closer to investigations and emergencies, if and when they happen. But for the rest of us, we've got about 175 people who usually work out of the Lansing office, and we transitioned over a weekend. I think we were all there on March 12th, and by March 17th, we were all working from home. And we've moved our hearings, sort of the back and forth that happens in our cases, as well as our meetings, online. And the feedback we've gotten has been really positive. In certain cases, I think we've gotten more public input as a result of people not having to travel to Lansing to sort of make their voice heard on a meeting. And I think that's been really positive. Stakeholder groups and the rest, we've been able to bring in national folks who usually would have to fly in, and instead they can sort of Zoom in. And I think we've learned lessons in this that, I think everybody hopes that we return to something that looks like normal sooner rather than later. But I would imagine that some of the lessons that we've learned will be sticky, and that we can improve our processes to better serve Michiganders as a result of having learned the lessons that we have.
Yeah, better than normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think this is the new normal. I don't think we're ever going back to the way it was. Matt and I've talked about this. A lot of offices, all those office spaces have been leased out so you can be in the pod farms. Now that the employers have seen that people can work from home and probably, in many cases, I've heard, are much more efficient. I mean, everything is going to change. I mean, you got to begin to question, why do we live in cities anymore?
I'm wondering how many real estate investment trusts are going to be in trouble that are invested in office complexes, because I don't think a lot of that space is coming back anytime soon. So.
No, definitely not. So we're almost out of time. So if folks want to reach out to you, Dan, or get to the Michigan Public Service Commission or attend one of your virtual meetings, how do they do that?
Sure. Our website is michigan.gov/MPSC, as in Michigan Public Service Commission. You can follow us on Twitter at MichiganPSC. And again, for those struggling, probably most importantly, 211 or 211.org or my211.org, or call your utility provider or telecommunications provider. They've got assistance available.
Tell them that Dan Scripps is in your corner, right?
Exactly.
Additional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life. But LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.